Hey everybody, what's up? Gary Simon here of DesignCourse.com. So today, because I've been sick now for over a week with COVID, I just have not had the energy or the willpower to create a new content. So what I'm going to be doing is giving you a module or a video from the upcoming DesignCourse.com, in which we're going to talk about, or I'm going to show you exactly how to build navigations. We're going to talk about navigation basics and make them responsive and also prototype them in Figma. All right, so if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe and let's get started. Now wait one moment, if you're interested in Figma, you might also be interested in making your designs a reality with front-end development. And if that's the case, then you could definitely check out the sponsor of this video, Scrimba.com.
They've recently launched their front-end development career path, which is a collection of courses that cover HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, and much, much more, as you see. It's over 75 hours of awesome content. There are hundreds of interactive coding challenges, and it's all geared towards helping you go from beginner to someone that's hireable as a front-end developer.
So click on the very top link here in the description and you'll gain access to the front-end development career path at Scrimba.com.
Welcome. We are going to talk about navigations here, and just one type of navigation, and the one that is going to be the most familiar, the most common that we see on websites, and that is a primary horizontal navigation that sits at the top of a layout. Now, there are a lot of other types of navigations that we're going to cover throughout this entire curriculum, but I don't want to bog you down with all of them at once because you'll probably forget a lot of them. So we're going to take things one step at a time. All right, so let's take a look here at first, just some slides of the structure of a navigation, because while we're talking about a simple navigation, there's a lot to think about even in a simple navigation. So a navigation first, you can define by having an entire background. You don't have to have a background that's a part of your nav bar, as it's called, or a navigation bar. You could just have it the same exact background color of the website that it's sitting on. Now, traditionally, a common pattern that we see is the branding will go on the left side. So the brand could be the logo, usually in SVG format. This case, it's just a word mark. And then we have a navigation itself that is typically right aligned to the side. Now, one thing that's really important is that we establish a solid visual hierarchy between these two type-based elements. Usually a logo will have text associated with it, and if that's the case, we don't want to use the same exact text here because then we have an issue of visual hierarchy. We're not sure where we should be looking first, so you want to separate these elements visually. And of course, you can do that in many ways, as you already know, through font size. This is a slightly smaller font size, also through font weight, and also through color and contrast. So these two are separated out quite well. Next up, you should always designate, when possible, which page a person is currently at. And you do that through the font weight. You could do it also and/or through color. You can actually change the background of it. You can underline it. There's many ways you can go about designating what is the current page that they're on. Now, additionally, your navigation or your nav bar can have multiple elements. For instance, here we have 3 columns. We have the branding, the navigation itself, and then we have a search element. So this is all about determining, based on the needs of the website or the app itself, if it makes sense to put a search bar or anything else, like a phone number. So these are decisions that you have to make before you get to the actual design process, and we'll be getting into that as well later in the curriculum. Now also, drop-down menus, that's another thing. If it makes sense for a given section of a website that may have subcategories, giving them quick access to it through a drop-down menu, which could be accessible when you click on a link, then do so. Just make sure, however, that you have good and solid visual hierarchy to differentiate this navigation from the top navigation up above. Now, additionally, responsive considerations. So your navigation needs to work on all devices. I cannot stress this enough, and this is something that we'll be talking about a lot because our designs that we create, they need to work on every device, from the smallest mobile phone, from a tablet, all the way up to a large desktop in which the browser is maximized. So here we could see we've made a decision. We don't have enough physical space when we get to a tablet size to include all of these elements. They would just become squished, and you do not want that. So you have to make a determination in terms of priority, which of these elements you can leave out. So the search bar here is something that we've decided we can leave out here. Now, next up, on a cell phone or a smartphone, we've decided that we don't have enough space physically for all this information. And so this is what's called a hamburger menu. And this menu is the most common pattern for establishing a actual navigation on a smartphone. Now notice we still have quite a bit of space right here. We could, for instance, specify maybe just one or two of these links because we have the space for it. So we could do something like this if our services really made sense in order to put it there. And then finally, once a person clicks on it, we want to make sure people actually have the links here for the navigation itself, and then a clear way for people to get back and out. All right, so that's a very quick little crash course on navigations. There's a lot of considerations, and now what we're going to do is I'm going to create one from scratch within Figma and also share the Figma way of doing this sort of thing. Okay, here in this Figma document, we have 3 different artboards, and I'm going to share this, by the way, and you can follow along because it's important to develop the muscle memory, because we're going to be learning about certain Figma features in order to make this navigation a reality. So here's what we have, what's kind of referred to as a skeleton UI. The intention is for this not to be a full user interface, but just to get us started with something so that we can have some context when we develop or design this navigation. So we're going to go with a standard pattern for having a navigation bar with a logo on the left and then also the navigation itself on the right. So to get started, I'm going to take the type tool and we're just going to have a type-based logo here, and I'm going to put in some company, and we're going to go to the design tab. This is the important part. Up until now, we've been just kind of changing the fill from this section, maybe making it white here. And we want to click this little icon that has the 4 dots, and it's the style section. All right, so right here we have different styles that are associated with our document. Now you may not see the same thing, as I've already been working within these, but essentially what we want to do is start using this when we start defining colors using this section, because then we're able to change a color in this central location, and then across all of our different frames, our different layouts and designs, any other element that's using that color will be updated automatically. All right, so for this I want to use white, and then we already have white selected here, and the way you add it is by clicking this plus sign right here. And then when you do that, you can then give it a name and it'll add it here to this section. So I already have one here called text, and we can use that color. We can also, I'm personally going to choose to make this into actually 2 different layers so that we can have more of an interesting logo. The way I'll do this, I'm going to zoom up here, is we're going to click plus, or rather click on this, the little icon, the styles icon, and then I'm going to make this one this primary light. All right, so if we access this and we click on this little adjustment bar, the properties for this is 00C2FF. All right, so if you want to use the same exact color, go ahead and choose it in the main color area, like right here, and then click on the styles icon and then click plus and give it a name. I gave mine primary light, and then hit enter. All right, then we're going to go ahead and take this, and then we're going to change this to some company right there, and then we'll go ahead and I'm going to choose this color, this primary color. Now this color code, just for your reference, happens to be 0075FF. All right, great. So now what we can do is I'm going to change this from Roboto to Nunito, and we'll make them both bold. All right, so now at this point, we're going to see what size this is. So in relation to the rest of the user interface, it does look a little small. So I'm going to use my keyboard up arrow keys with both selected. And I think right around 24 is pretty good. So we'll just move these over. And that is our logo. Now I'm going to take both of them and we're going to create a component. So you can right click, choose create component, or just Control Alt and K, which is what I'll do from now on. So now when we do that, notice in our layers, it becomes a component. We can rename it by double clicking and we'll just call this logo. And now in our other artboards in the future, when we go to replicate this, you don't have to follow along at this point. When I put it over here, we've created an instance of that component. Now, if I decide to change the color in the future, say from primary maybe to this lighter blue right here, it will update on all other artboards or layouts or frames, whichever you want to call it. Now, if I back up, one thing to note, when you have an instance of a component and you decide to change something about it, like the font size, weight, color, etc., it will not change it in the original. So if I change this to, let's say, white, it does not change it in the original component over here. So that's just something to be aware of. Let's go ahead and back up. And now it is the original. We can get rid of that. We will deal with this one in the future. So now we want to create the actual navigation, a horizontal navigation, which means it's going to be put into different columns all on the same row. Now, what's important for what we're about to do is it's really important to use guides, or rulers. So Control R, or Shift R rather, sorry. We're going to pull down, I already have some. I'm going to get rid of these just by dragging up here because I want to do this from scratch. We're going to drag down, and it doesn't have to be right on top of the type, but you'll see why we're doing this in a little bit. All right, so now the type will be pretty much centered right in the middle. And these guides are going to essentially allow us to keep everything in perfect alignment. And you'll see what I mean here going forward. So let's go ahead and create an actual navigation with the type element. So hit T on your keyboard, and we're going to put in home for the first link. All right, so right now, the font size of these elements is 24. This one is 24 as well. Let's go ahead and I choose white right here, click on the styles icon, and then click on the plus, and then change it to text, or you can name it light or whatever you want. All right, so now it's the light color. And we do have visual hierarchy separation simply because this is white and also because it's moved over here. But typically, I would like to scale this down just a little bit. So we'll go to around 18. And we're going to make sure that we are indeed in the center here. Right there. You see the guides right through the center. That's what you want. Okay, great. So at this point, instead of just doing this manually and duplicating these and putting one here, like products, and then duplicating another one, there's a better way of doing this so that we create a maintainable system for our design. When we're just dealing with one little page right here and that's it, and we're finished, just for an example, it's fine to do it like this, but most projects are going to have a lot of different pages that are reusing this navigation. And when you want to make a change, it's horrible to have to make a change in all these other iterations of these versions that are using your navigation. So we want to do things intelligently with components, interactive components, and something called variants as well. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So what I want to do is, instead of just creating a component out of this here specifically, I want to create a rectangle container out of it. And we want it to match up with this guide right there all the way to this bottom. Now we're going to just push it down beneath the home text so that we can see it. And right now I'm going to actually get rid of the fill, and we'll just do that by clicking that little minus sign. Now I'm going to take both of these elements, So now both are selected, and we're going to right click and we're going to choose Add Auto Layout. All right, so what that ends up doing is we've created what's called an auto layout, and in our property inspector over here, we can see we have constraints and resizing. We have auto layout right here at the top, and we have a couple different options. So if we adjust this right here, spacing between items, this is something that we'll eventually get to, but it's not relevant for this current example. If we click on here, notice it says mixed. That's because it's the top, right, left, or sorry, the top padding, the right padding, the bottom padding, and the left padding are of different values right now. And so if we adjust these, or add 9 here, we'll see that it affects the actual position of the element inside of it, which in this case it happens to be text. So at this point, we're going to create a component. So Control Alt K. All right, so now when we do that, we have this option over here called variants, and we're going to click on the variants plus sign. Now it adds this purple stroke around it, letting us know that this is a variant. Now what is the purpose of a variant? So essentially this is going to allow us to create different states of our button. So when somebody hovers over it with a mouse, we can create a difference in the design. If somebody clicks on it, we can create a press state, and so on and so forth. So when you create a variant, it'll automatically create a duplicate version of whatever it is that you created the variant from. So the bottom one, and notice over here when we have under the property inspector, under the variant section, we have property 1. Its name is default. We can just leave that as default. For here, notice it's variant 2. Let's change this to hover. All right, so now we can make something change about this design. We could, for instance, change the background. Remember, we removed the background here, so we could give it a fill, and then maybe we can change it to panel dark right here, which is another color. We'll leave it like that. I'm not going to leave it with this design, but I'll just show you real quickly. And once you have your design changed here, then you can come to the prototype tab and notice this little plus icon. We're going to drag it over, and then over here where it says on click, we're going to change to while hovering. So because we're creating a hover state. Notice all these other options that we have for triggering different design changes. So we're going to choose while hovering, and we're going to change it right here, change to property 1 hover, which we already drugged this over here. You can have animations like instant, dissolve, smart animate. We'll get into these things in the future, but we're going to leave it right there for now. Now, if we want to get this onto our artboard, we come to our assets section, and we're just going to drag this over, and there we go. So now, if we click on play right up here in the upper right corner, oh, sorry, it's not currently designating this as the frame that we want to play. Let's click play again. And we hover over it. Look at that. And it just works. So let's continue on. For me, I don't want to have a background kind of adjust like that. I just want to change the type color. So what we'll do is instead of, we're going to come back to our design section, and we are going to get rid of panel dark there. We're going to double click to select into right there this type, and for the text we're going to change this to text hover. So just to show you that color code, if you're following along, that is 92E5FF. All right, so now we can go back, and when you leave this tab open, all your changes happen automatically, so you don't have to refresh it manually. Now it has the new type here. So I tried to scroll up a little bit so you can see that, but it's a little bit finicky. Okay, great. So what's great about this is now we can duplicate this. Just Control D, move it over. See, they're right there at the edge of each other. Now we can duplicate into this and change this to products. And now go back, they both work automatically. All right, so we can duplicate this one more time. And then maybe we'll have frequently asked questions, and we'll duplicate it one more. And we'll change this here to contact. Oop, not that version. There we go. Now we can take all these, we can move them over. And we also should have, remember what I said, a design specifically for the currently active page. So how you choose to do that is up to you, but what we can do now is we can come over here and we can duplicate this. So Control D. And now what we can do is we can name this to active, because this will be our active state button. And then we can double click into here and we'll click this section, and we'll just use perhaps our primary light color. And then we can come over here to home and we'll say that that is the currently active page. Actually, you know what? Let's make products the currently active page. So then what we can do is we can change from text to primary. Oops, sorry, wrong area. What we want to do is change this from default to active. All right, so now if we go back, there we go. So now what we can do is we can take these 4 elements and we can right click and choose to add, or Shift A, an auto layout, and that way we can be able to create white space, extra white space between these elements if we wish. So auto layout. So then we can come over here and we can choose spacing between elements, and we can click this up, and that way we can easily adjust the white space just by adjusting this value right here. So again, to get into this, you can see where it says frame 5. We can just call this nav right here. We can double click into this and then access all these other elements. So just remember, double click, or to get inside of your nested items, you can navigate here through your layers panel over in this section. And then finally, we can also take these elements right here and we could create a component, but there's a problem right now if we did that, and I'll show you. So Control Alt K, and when I do that, if we go back here, no longer do the hover actually work. The interaction just doesn't work when you try to create a component based on components that are nested inside of it that have interactions with them. Now that's an issue that might be fixed in the future, but at the time of recording this, it's not fixed. So I'm gonna back up just to make sure that we're not dealing with that situation. Now we could also right click and create a auto layout here as well. One more thing before I forget though, with auto layouts, we can move things around very easily, which is always very fun. And you can easily duplicate another item to create, more nav links if you wish. But yes, we can take this here and create an auto layout from these 2 sections. And notice how it kind of pushed this up, which is something that can happen sometimes when you're dealing with auto layout. Simply a matter of kind of clicking around inside. We're going to push this down, and then we're going to take both of these and make sure we choose to center to align in the middle. So now this is one big auto layout. We could actually take this and push it over here, that over there, although we wouldn't necessarily need to do that. And so now if we hit Shift R to get rid of those, we can now duplicate this and then place it over here. And then make sure we're lined up here. There we go. And then we can reduce the amount of white space between it automatically. And we definitely will have enough room for a tablet, so we're not going to have to condense anything. All right, and if you wanted to, you could, for instance, make it so that the right of the T is along this guide right there. And of course, if you want to be absolutely certain, you can place it right there. And I was able to get that eyeballed up pretty good. All right, so that's looking good. And of course, we can always drag in prototype mode this over here, and we can click play just to make sure it's all working there as well. And then we can also do the same thing over here. However, I'm going to tell you right now, I know for certain that we're not going to have enough room. So if I duplicate this and we put some company there, we're not going to have anywhere near enough room to, if I just change this manually to 0, just not enough room. We may have enough room maybe for one link, but really with the current size of the logo, it would be best just to stick with the hamburger menu. So we can double click into here and just delete that whole nav. All right, so now we're gonna have a hamburger menu in this section, and we'll come out. Actually, we can right click here and just go to plugins and choose Iconify. And I've already searched for menu, just click find icons after entering menu. And let's just use this one right here, just drag it on. And we want to use our color styles. We're going to use text here, just for something that's high contrast and that people can easily see and be able to click on. All right, that looks pretty good right around there. You could always come in here and make this wider if you wish. I think that's a little bit better. All right, so now what we want to do is we're going to take this here and we're going to create a component out of it. So Control-Alt-K, and now it's purple outline, thus a component. And what we want to do now is create an overlay for the actual slide out navigation, for the mobile navigation. So we're going to take our rectangle and we'll just go about 2/3. You can go all the way out if you wish. But just make sure you have enough space and padding and white space on the inside of it so that it doesn't get cluttered. You want to have a lot of room for people's fingers to be able to press on, and a lot of white space with the actual links. So for the background of this, we want to make sure that it's just different enough from the background so that it doesn't get confused or lost within the main interface. So for that, I'm going to use one called Panel Dark. And we could probably even go a little darker than this. It's just slightly darker than the background, but that will work. And if you want to see what that looks like, it is 27282E. All right. So now we're going to create this design specifically for our navigation. So we could reuse these buttons over here, these actual button components, but I'm not going to choose to do that. We can just create these from scratch just because it is a different type of navigation that's going to be stacked vertically on top of each other. So I can just come out here with a type tool. We'll choose home, and we will also make these white. All right, so we're using 18 here. These are all using 18 as well. They don't necessarily have to match up and be the same. In fact, it would make a little bit more sense to make these a little bit larger on mobile so people can clearly click on them. And you have options in terms of alignment too. You can align them to the right. You can align them here to the left. What I wouldn't do is align everything in the center because that never really works well, especially when you have different characters, different number of characters. So if I put products here and put it in the middle, it doesn't flow well because there's no discernible actual column on the left or right. So instead of doing that, let's go ahead, and I'm pretty happy with this. We'll keep this example pretty simple. We could have like a container around it, kind of like we did here, and then have a different background color slightly from this one. But just to keep this simple, we're going to go ahead and create a component out of this. So Control-Alt-K. It is now a component. And then we can just duplicate this Or if we want to have component states, for instance, like a pressed state, we can do the variant. So we might as well get our practice under our belt. So we can now click on variants. You make sure you double click into that so we get access to the text. And let's just make it primary light. And we will call this, once we click back here, to active. And then we'll come to prototype, drag it while hovering. All right, and for this right here, we want to rename this from home. We'll call this to mobile navigation buttons. So we come back to our assets and we see mobile navigation buttons. We can place this right here, and then we can go ahead and duplicate this. We'll call this one products. All right, and then we'll name this one FAQ. And then finally, contact. Now we're going to change this one right here. Oops, let's not do that. Let's go back to design. We're going to change this one here to active, just to keep in line with this. And then we're going to select all of these four, and then we're going to create a auto layout. All right, so now we can adjust the spacing, and notice how it knew based on the alignment of these elements to adjust them vertical. And now we could also click this button here to change the direction of the layout, which is really handy. All right, so that's looking pretty good right there. You want to give users a way to exit out, so we can right click, go to plugins and iconify. We'll type in exit. Maybe let's see, I'm not sure if I see one that I like very much. Close. There we go. So we'll just choose this filled version right here. Sometimes when you drag them on, they're quite large, so Shift Alt and just scale down. And we'll use our styles. We're going to make this white. And if we're going to put this here, and I don't really like it over here, I kind of like sticking to the standard conventions of just kind of keeping things over here. Now, when I'm hovering over this, it's looking like it wants to add it in the menu that's behind here. So what I'm going to do is go back to my layers, and I want to make sure that if I just move this temporarily, that we lock that, because I don't want anything. I don't want any interference with that button here. So if I select this, we'll get this moved over, centered up right there, and there we go. All right, so now what we want to do is we're going to take all these elements right here. So there's 3 elements selected, and we're going to create a component out of those. So Control Alt K, and we're going to move it off the screen. And then we're going to switch to prototype. We're going to click on our button, which is currently locked. We'll click on it, and we're going to drag it over here to this. So on click, which is the action that we want to open overlay. So it's going to open this up. Now we want to make sure that for the overlay, we choose manual placement. So what that means, we see a duplicate version of it, and we can push it over here and get it aligned up with exactly where we had it before. And that way, when that menu is clicked, it will automatically go back. So now at this point, where it says move in, if we click this, it's going to show you what direction the overlay will come from. So we want to leave it right here, coming from this area over here, because it's aligned to the right anyhow. And then you could also change the easings and the duration of the animation. The easings will affect how the animations occur, and that's something that you can play around with yourself. So what we can do now is we can switch this little play icon. So when we click play, it's going to show us that board, and we can click on it, and there we go. Now what happens if we try to click this? Nothing, because we haven't tied it to go back or to hide the overlay. So what we can do now is when somebody clicks that, we can take this, go back there to the original, and this will be, let's see what happens when we simply leave it to that default option. So it kind of just hides. What we can do is close overlay. Now let's try that. And there we go. It will automatically reverse instead of just hiding it like that. Now we don't have to worry about hover states for the other buttons, simply because on a mobile device you don't have hover. Now something in the future we may get involved with is having pressed states. But for now this is pretty good. And now all of our designs for desktop, let's click play. Oops, I have to drag this over here. Got to remember that. We'll click play again. So for desktop, it works right here. Also for iPad or tablets, these work as well. And then also you just saw the mobile version.
All right, everybody, hopefully you found that interesting. I think I'll be creating new videos next week, unless something really takes a downturn. Well, for sure, I'll be creating new videos. And definitely go to DesignCourse.com, enter your email to be notified when it launches, which is going to be in January 4th of 2022. I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.